miss with minimum wage in America. You see how they've gotten away with this? I mean, could you imagine if they tried to do this overnight and they told people in the 1960s who were getting paid $1 an hour minimum wage, they said, hey, tomorrow your dollar is going to suddenly be worth 2.5 cents. Sorry, folks. Could you imagine what would have happened? Imagine. But they knew if they did it gradually, slowly, incrementally, just like the frog in the pot of water, you turn up the heat slow enough, and guess what happens? You're successful. That the frog is lulled to sleep. So they've given us trinkets and knickknacks to anesthetize us, to lull us to sleep, to mesmerize us. Okay, the smartphones and everything today. I mean, to sedate us and to trick us and just say, hey, well, this we kept them in the pot, they're cooked, and now they don't even know what to do with us because the rubber's going to meet the road. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, the ship's on the rocks already. Okay, we've already hit the wall, but certain people haven't realized it yet. This is what the critical mass thing comes into play, is that as long as they walk this tightrope and they've got a critical mass that they've appeased, that they've kept satisfied, okay, then they're not going to revolt. And if those people are in positions of power, political power, and that create the policies that we live under, you know, the money printing classes involved and all, they're all in cahoots with each other, then they think they could kick this can down the road indefinitely. But they can't because they're being exposed right and left. People are starting to understand guys like me aren't nuts, that I really know my stuff. I know what I'm talking about. I know at least how to distinguish true capitalism from crony capitalism. And look up crony capitalism. Are you interested in that term? It's where the government's involved, which makes it fascist. When the government works against the best interests of the people at large, that's everyday people. That's you and me. That's just regular blue-collar, working-class people that are hopeful, you know, to enter the middle class and home ownership and all that good stuff, the American dream. Okay? When they're working against your best interests, knowingly, and they say, well, but it's in my interest, and they, you know, maybe they won't notice, right? So that's how they keep doing this thing. They keep on sweeping the truth under the rug. But eventually people are going to figure it out. The politicians raise your cost of living. You say, why would they do that when it diminishes the worth of their own money? It debases their own currency when you cause inflation and your cost of living tax to go up. Yes, a tax, just as pernicious as anything the government extracts from you. Even worse, if you got to pay it to live, the cost of living, dissect the term, the cost of existing, okay, then yeah, it's just as frightening and foreboding. You better damn pay that. You want to keep living? You don't want to be under that bridge? You better pay that rent. You better pay that mortgage. You better pay that beast. And no matter how harder and harder that nut gets to crack, no matter how higher and higher that bar gets to reach, you don't do it, then you're dead. You won't want to be weak, do you? You can't reach the bar? Come on, man. You know, this is dog eat dog, rat race. You better get with the program, man. You better get tough. You better get strong. Better get mean. You better get cutthroat. You better be willing to step on some toes. You better be ready to break some eggs. Right? Isn't that the spirit of this world? Is that what it's telling you? So this is where we're at this point in history. I mean, it's a mess. We're in a lot of trouble. But at least we know that God ultimately is in control, and that intelligence is coming through, that light is shining through it, exposing the darkness to the light of day, the best disinfectant, right? So this is it. This is knowledge. It's power. It's wisdom. And it's learning and all these good things, and people are getting it. And they're getting empowered with the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. They're seeing through the lies. These politicians just give themselves raises. You know, well, why would they do it? And then we got the mainstream media involved. Of course, we know most of these people have jobs where they can afford a middle-class lifestyle. We all know that, right? So as long as they appease the right people in the right positions, do you understand how this thing works? That critical mass, they keep getting away with this thing. But it could be a dwindling number, more and more and more, right? Harder and harder and harder. And people start seeing the schism, the alienation they feel, those that are well-heeled, and they say, my God, my conscience is aching. What's bothering me? I can't enjoy my life. I have all this financial freedom, all this financial security, and I can't enjoy it. What's going on here? You understand? And I'm trying to tell you what's going on here. What the problem is, and, you know, what the answer is, you know, how are we going to cope with this thing? Well, we're going to have to pray. We're going to have to turn to God and depend on His grace and mercy and power and strength and all that stuff that, we all need. But, this is in order to shake off this ever encroaching evil that we're all having to cope with and contend with. And just remember at least this much. I can tell you, don't blame people on a local level. Okay, don't blame your landlord. Don't blame your local banker. And remember, the problem is stemming from the very top of this pyramid of power, the very tippy top. Okay, so if you want to really point the finger and blame somebody, it's the Federal Reservists. It's an evil entity. It's got to go. It's been evil since over 55 years now, since the assassination of JFK. We had a coup d'etat. They took over. And a few political black hats is all it takes, a critical mass. It could be 99.99% of the FBI is good and upright. All you need is a few bad apples in there, okay, the black hats, in the right positions, and they can get away with unbelievable things. The same thing with 9/11. You say, well, how could they get all those people? What do you mean planting explosives? They could have done it for months, years maybe. They could have been planting explosives in those buildings. Don't you understand? They could have trained people overnight how to plant explosives, then rub them out when the job is done. Any of them they thought would talk. That's it. You hire hitmen. I mean, you can hire killers. Everybody knows you that. Assassins and black ops. These soldiers of fortune. All this kind of stuff. Mercenaries. We all know this stuff is real and true. So that's how they do it. They just silence anybody they think, even if they are not going to squeal. Long before they squeal and say, hey, I'm going to turn state's evidence on you. I was in there planting those buildings. You told me you were just going to implode it because it had to be brought down because of the asbestos. And we weren't going to talk about it with the public, and because it was, we didn't want to alarm them. And we wanted to keep the building for rent. It was all about money. It would have been bad for commerce, bad for business on a mass scale if we had to shut down those buildings while we were rigging them with explosives, guys. So, just do what we tell you. But, a handful of guys that had years to work in those buildings, in the walls. Remember, they're in these walls where they got elevators going up and down the walls of these things. So they could work. And there was people that reported hearing sounds, and they assume it's maintenance going on. So you understand how they can get away with this crap. But, all the experts say, we're talking about well over 2,000 architects and engineers that say the official story is preposterous. 6 out of 10 of the commissioners that were involved in the investigation of 9/11 said it couldn't have happened that way. Impossible, ridiculous, absurd. No way, Jose. Okay? So, it's just not me talking out my behind here. Okay, I'm going to the experts because I believed the official story on the day of 9/11. I thought, oh boy. People that disputed it, I said, look, how do you know how 110-story buildings are going to respond to jumbo jets full of fuel crashing into them? How do you know? That's what I said. They can do research and development. But then I started listening to the experts, and they said, indeed, they do research and development. They want to know how these skyscrapers are going to respond in the event of an accident even. So the way it was described by architects and engineers I trust is that, hey, it's about like taking a sharp pencil and poking it through a taut screen door. It goes through it. It doesn't take down the whole screen door. Okay, but that's all it was. And all that fuel was burned off real quickly. That black smoke was an indicator of how cool it was. There's no reason for molten metal in the basement level floor of these buildings. It's absurd. And then the missing gold, you start adding it up. One of Bush's brothers was in charge of security at these buildings. Building 6, which stored all these records, was destroyed, and it wasn't even hit by any planes, but maybe that explains the one plane that went down in Pennsylvania. You start putting all this stuff together, and maybe a few decoys. Maybe like that one that went into the Pentagon. Well, that was a decoy or something. Who knows what the heck's going on here? But this is biblical level deceptions. We know that much. This is real evil. Could you imagine being so evil and having on your conscience killing some 3,000 innocent people, God's children, and you're going to stand before your Maker someday? So we've got to understand just how grave the circumstances we are in. You must care. If you don't care about the least of men, you can't call yourself a Christian. Okay, you're not going to ever please God because you're ignoring Jesus Christ. You're at least indifferent. You're at least complacent. Okay, and so you are part of the problem. Okay, and we cannot be found worthy and deserving of inheriting a better world, okay, unless our hands are clean, our hearts are pure, and we get it. We understand that we better damn well be genuine and sincere, serious, sober-minded when it comes to wanting the best for everybody. The same things. It's not hard to figure out. God's desire for us is not a mystery. Far from it. Quite the opposite. It's got to be as clear as the light of day if we are to emulate Him and to be all that we can be, the best we can be. Wish the best for everybody. Live by those new 2 commandments, the golden rule. Treat others the way you want to be treated. Think of others the way you want them to think about you. Project only what you would like projected upon you. Okay? And remember, it's every man's prerogative not to have an enemy in the world. Okay? And there's not a damn thing any of us can do if people say, well, I think you're my enemy because you believe in a basic universal income. Well, I think you're Martin Luther King Jr.'s enemy because this was one of his premier ideas, principles, precepts. This is this idea you want to cut way back on crime, then we need a war on poverty because we know that the desperate poverty is the biggest driver of the crime. So this is why I say I'm a fiscal conservative. This is not a socialist thing. This is not a liberal thing. This is a fiscally conservative thing, this idea of a basic universal income. Nobody even knows, was Martin Luther King Jr. a conservative or liberal? He didn't care. See, he was way beyond that stuff. He transposed all that stuff, or he was beyond all that stuff. Okay, and no, it's not. It's not. So I mean, the liberals like it. The egalitarian liberals. What's wrong with that? You call yourself Christian, then of course, by default, you're an egalitarian. You believe in equality. God doesn't play favorites. I mean, what kind of parent, would do that? What children would respect their parent if they're always playing favorites with one of the kids? You got 2 kids and you're playing, what kind of deal is that? Even if one kid's a stinker, okay, you still don't play favorites. You let them know, I love you both the same. You have free will choice. I can't decide, how you should think, how you should speak, what you should do. You have the same wherewithal to be who you truly want to be, not who you think you want to be on the surface, as I do, or he does, or she does, or any of us do. So, do what's right. Be all that you can be. Be exactly who you want to be. Don't be who you think you want to be on the surface, okay? Dig deep down in the marrow of your heart, your soul, your spirit, your mind. Remember, this is about eternity. This is about the long run. So, anyhow, I said I thought I was done with pontificating, but apparently I wasn't. We got Paul Manafort. You know what? I feel sorry for the poor bastard. People get greedy. I mean, they get avarice and the money and all this stuff, and it takes over. That's why it's a great warning. Remember, the love of money is the root of all evil. But, I mean, this reminds me of, who was it, the lady, Martha Stewart, right? I mean, they got to make an example. And now we got this new thing with the college scandals, the payoffs. We all know this stuff goes on. They're coming out with this stuff on the news like it's bombshell, okay? It's sensational. Wow, woo, an epiphany. It's just, we all know this stuff. Good God Almighty. I mean, I work for this guy, Dr. Harold Sundin, down in Santa Cruz. I know he's passed on now. But he was very active in the Seventh-day Adventist Church in Santa Cruz. Wonderful people, cream of the crop. It's just nice to know people like that exist. I mean, here's a group of people that if you want to be a member of their church, they'll let you in. You don't have to be a vegetarian. A lot of them aren't vegetarians, but they prescribe to health principles mostly. Greatest people in the world. But they will give you the shirt off their back. It's just nice to know that people like that exist. So anyhow, Harold Sundin, he built the Sundin Hall, which was where they had special events and whatnot. So he was generous with his money toward the church. And I happened to work for the man on a private basis at his residence there in the Pasatiempo Hills there near the golf course there, kind of upper class neighborhood in the hills just outside of 5 minutes away from Santa Cruz, but you felt like you're out in the hills. But I remember one day I was weed whacking out there and I hit a nest of hornets.